Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty One territory, the home and traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Indian, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing the panel. With me via Zoom are Gail Anderson and Jeff Peich. The assessor today is Stephen Lobenstein, and the recording secretary is Stephen Lunn. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 3, 6 through 8, and 10 on the docket today. Mr. Lund, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Lobenstein, please state your full name.
Stephen Lobenstein.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. And then my colleagues Ryan San Juan, he'll have to confirm right now too.
Mr. San Juan, please state your full name.
Ryan San Juan.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, if you please stand, and please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
All right. The first property on the docket today is 555 Logan Avenue. I noticed there is a difference in the exempt areas provided by the parties. Pardon, Marcello, or is?
Yes, there is a classification and liability application there.
Okay, I didn't see it on the table table of contents. All right, so there's class and liability first. So we'll deal with that first. So Mr. Marcello, can you go on the classification and liability?
Just on the classification liability, or do you want me to present the entire brief?
No, just on class. You have the. We'll deal with class and liability first, and you have the onus on that.
Okay,
And then we'll deal with the quantum, which the city has the onus of.
okay. So we'll start on page 17 of the brief, and that is the combined quantum and classification liability brief. So we are looking for a school tax exemption under section 23(1) of the Act, and specifically section D, which is owned or held in trust for and used by a college or seminary of learning to a maximum exemption of 1.62 hectares. And typically this exemption is applied to organizations, schools that provide learning in some capacity. However, our subject here is essentially a museum. Now, it is instructing people in a particular type of learning. So I will get into that in the next few pages. So in the summary, you can see the exemption that we are seeking in terms of the quantum. Now, if you turn your pages to page 22, this is the property. So the property is called the Costume Museum of Canada. And there, what they do is basically preserve the cultural side of fabrics and costumes, and they also teach about this particular field. And so we're talking about materials and the preservation of also these types of assets, cultural assets. Now they are a charity, and on page 25, you can also see that they also perform programming. You can see there that different types of programming: museum in a suitcase, discovery cases, the fabric of a nation, fiber to fabric. These are all types of instruction and learning courses that they give. Now, what you don't see on page 25 is the cutoff portion that you see at the very top above museum in a suitcase. That actually was supposed to say educational programs. And it was unfortunately cut off, I guess, in terms of the transfer from the web page to the PDF form. It wasn't able to recognize the text, so it accidentally cut that off. But what it does say there is educational programs. Now, the rest of the presentation regarding the liability, basically just a repetition of the different types of things that they do in terms of their programming. And also on page 49, again, how you become a member, volunteer, donations, all of that. That is basically it. The school tax exemption, or the seminarial learning clause, is being sought because this organization is instructing in the field of materials, fabric, and restoration and preservation of these types of cultural assets. So that is it.
Okay. On class and liability, Mr. Robinson, any questions?
Yeah, just a few. Where do these classes take place? And I ask this question because on page 26, I see mailing address 41070 Arthur Street. So I haven't seen anything in their website.
Yeah.
555 Logan. So which is the museum?
So 555 Logan is the location of the museum, and the programming is handled through there. I believe 41070 Arthur Street is just a contact person.
Okay.
However, we did ask our client, who is the property manager, whether the costume museum was actually still here, and they are still here. So that is where their operations are, is 555 Logan.
And okay, so and are these classes, do people have to pay for these classes? Because as you stated in your brief.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there's no
No.
curriculum.
everything seems to be on a volunteer basis, on a nonprofit basis as well.
Those are all my questions.
All right, Gail, any questions?
Just in regards to the museum itself, the Costume Museum of Canada, like, is there any publication that you have on file that demonstrates that that's the address they're at? Just wondering, because on the web, right, it comes up as Arthur. Wondering if
No, I believe Arthur, I think that is just a contact. However, as I stated to Mr. Lovenstein, we called the client to ask them, because actually we did find another address for the contact for the Costume Museum of Canada. So we wanted to make sure that this museum was actually still functioning out of this location, and they did instruct us that they were still there.
okay, and what's its hours of operation then? Open, these classes are open to the public, and what's the hours of operation?
I'm not exactly sure about the hours of operation. I would say that they're probably standard business hours, Monday through Fridays. I can't give you a definite answer on that.
Okay, and do you have any information in regards to where a potential participant contacts to take part in the education?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jeff, any questions?
Yeah, just further on that point, if I were interested, how do I go about signing up for these classes?
So they have contact information there on the website. So you would go through the website to contact them about the particular type of programming that you would be looking at.
And the question was asked, but maybe I just didn't quite hear it. So I will attend where to take these classes?
555 Logan.
It will be at the local site?
Yeah.
And is there a classroom at the site?
It's a large space, so I'm assuming that they use it as museum and classroom space. But from what I've read on the website, they also do programming at schools. So they will take this show on the road, as you would say.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you.
All right, do you? I'm just trying to wondering how to phrase this. Are you aware of any other museums that receive an exemption for providing educational programs? Is this common? I know a lot of museums have some sort of programs.
Well, museums in general, if they are operating as the only entity, for example, the Manitoba Museum would be exempt. I'm not sure under what categories, tax exemption or a full exemption. I'm not exactly sure, but they are the sole occupier of the building. In this case, this is not the sole occupier of the building. So we can't seek that exemption. We have to seek an exemption that is dealing with the seminary learning.
Yeah, okay. All right. I have no more questions. So Mr. Lobenstein on the classification and liability event.
I don't have any materials to submit today. I couldn't find any sort of precedences for this in terms of case law or anything. I mean, I guess I'll just quickly go to the page, well, simply put, as Marcelo put, that there's no curriculum for this. It just seems to be, I mean, I'm not too sure even what it is in terms of education. So, I mean, I find it hard for it to fall under the 23(1)(d), is owned by or is held in trust or used by a college or seminar of learning to maximum exemption. So, I mean, sorry, I can't seem to find any information on something like this at the moment.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Marcello?
I don't have any questions regarding this.
Okay, Gail, any questions?
Yes, for the assessor. The current exemption that's part of the realty assessment, 215,000, what does that relate to? That relates to the museum, right?
Nope, that's a daycare in there.
That's a daycare. Oh, okay. So that is an exemption relative to a daycare that's operating in that premise. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jeff, questions?
Have none, thank you.
Okay, and again, I'm just kind of wondering, well, I guess, Mr. Lamson, you might not be the right person to ask this. Maybe it's more directed to Marcello. What's the nature, do you know the nature of these programs? Is it just like a guided tour that they talk about the exhibits, or is it specific?
I only know as much as what they put on their website.
Yeah. So if you turn to page 22 or 25.
Yep.
So the first one is called Museum in a Suitcase. So this program allows the museum to be brought into the school classroom. The suitcases contain materials which focus on aspects of textiles, clothing history, which are designed for educational levels from primary through secondary levels. Hands-on interaction with artifacts encourages an appreciation of the objects and stories they tell. And again, they're not typical school classes. I mean, they have different names, obviously, but what they are doing is instructing people about fabrics. And those are essentially the courses that they give there on page 25.
Okay. All right.
I
Thank
think
you very much. So I think we'll reserve on the class and liability, and then
I was just going to make one quick summation, if that's okay. When
sure.
considering a college or a seminar or learning as defined in the Municipal Assessment Act, usually you walk away with a document or a piece of paper saying you've completed it. I mean, in this situation, I understand they are giving knowledge, but I don't believe that you are going to be walking away with anything saying you've completed any courses. So I think there is a huge difference between the two.
May I give a brief?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think I think there are some clear-cut cases of where the school tax exemption is, especially based on this section D, is pretty clear-cut because we have, for example, a school that is legislated under some section of legislation under the province, right? Robertson Career Colleges, those types of entities. However, the seminary of learning is a little bit more vague. And the one precedent regarding the Law Society simply meant that lawyers were receiving instruction at that location, the Law Society of Manitoba. It's not really a school, not really legislated under the province in any way, but they were receiving instruction. So it was regarded as a seminarial learning. So while I agree with Mr. Levenstein that it's clearly not a school and we wouldn't consider it that way, I think that the definition of seminary of learning is very vague, and purposely so. Because it can include a lot of different entities that would give some type of instruction, a plot where you could, learn about whatever. And again, the legislation is purposely vague for that very same reason, is that it can apply to many different types of entities.
Okay, that I was going to ask about the the Law Society example, where a lot of professional groups have mandatory continuous training and in their offices, and don't necessarily give out a certificate or anything like that at the end of the course, but it does count for professional development hours. Mr. Loppenstein, what's your take on that?
Well, I think you sort of nailed it there, where you said it's mandatory. They have to do it to get the credits to continue with their profession. So this is something very different from that, where this is completely on a volunteer basis, where people just want to. It's like any museum. You go and learn at a museum. So you learn about what they want, that you have the decision to go or not to go.
Okay, Marcello, your take on that?
Well, I don't know in the legislation where it says that it has to be a mandatory part of your career path. All it says is a seminary of learning, and clearly that interpretation can mean many different things. So I don't think it has to be such a narrow view that it has to be for strictly professional reasons. I think if that were the case, then the legislation probably would have read that.
All right. Gail or Jeff, are any questions arising from that?
No, I think it's been considered. The questions that I have been asked and answered by others as well. So appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Additional questions. Thanks, Neil.
All right. So we'll reserve on the class and liability, and now then we'll move on to the quantum. So Mr. Loppenstein on the quantum.
Yeah, Mr. San Juan will be doing the presentation for the quantum.
Okay.
So the roll number is 1308-197-0100. Address is 555 Logan Avenue. Roll year is 2023. Reference date is April 1st, 2021. This is a split class property. Assessed value for the exempt portion is $215,000. Taxable portion is $7,283,000. And total assessed value is $7,498,000. Number of buildings is 1, number of premises 3, number of stories 1, actual and effective years built 1987. Wall height is 24 feet. Zoning is general manufacturing. Land area is 302,389 square feet. Plan area is 120,888 square feet. Leasable area is 121,418 square feet, and land to plan area is 2.5. And page 2. Request for income has been received. Owner is compliant. Mailer is on the addenda on the back. Page 3. Property is located in the northwest quadrant of the city, corner of Logan and Isabel. Bottom picture is the subject aerial view, overhead view of the subject property. Access is on Logan, Gunnell, and Henry. Page 4. Is other aerial views from different angles. Page 5 is the workup for the exempt premise. Leasable area is 3,200 square feet. Potential rent is $20,000, utilizing a model rate of $6.25 per square feet and a 6.5% model vacancy rate, utilizing 3% for non-recoverable expenses and $3.85 per square feet for vacancy shortfall. This results in an NOI of $17,338, utilizing a cap rate of 8.05%. This results in a rounded capitalized and assessed value of $215,000. Using these parameters on the next page, page 6. Is the workup for the 2 taxable premises. And the leasable area is total is 118,218 square feet. Potential rent total is 679,047 square feet or dollars. And we're utilizing a blended model rate of $5.74 per square foot, 6.5% model vacancy rate, utilizing 3% for non-recoverable expenses and $3.85 per square foot for vacancy shortfall. This results in an NOI of $586,278, utilizing a cap rate of 8.05%. This results in a rounded capitalized and assessed value of $7,283,000. Page 7. Rent comparables. These comparables are what the net rents model is based on, actual rents from the market. Like the subject, all comparables are in close proximity to the subject property. All leases are current in relation to the reference date, range from 2016 to 2020. Effective year built ranges from 1952 to 2012. Average wall heights range from 14 to 31 feet. Leasable areas range approximately from 3,780 square feet to 100,187 square feet, similar to the subject property. Net rents range from $5.07 per square feet to $6.27 per square feet. Page 8. Here's the summary of the 2 workups from page 5 and 6. The total assessed value is $7,498,000. Page 9. On page 9, you'll find our capitalization rate chart. The table second from the top are the industrial capitalization rates that fall between the 20th and 80th percentile. As you can see, the subject property's capitalization rate falls outside the 80th percentile. Our model cap rates are further supported by the table on the outside sources. You can see that Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman have developed cap rates ranging between 5.75 to 7.25. Page 11 and 12. And this is the income and expense mailer. The owner is compliant and property is mostly owner occupied. And so we feel that the value is fair and equitable and should be confirmed, and we're open to any questions.
Okay, Marcello, questions?
Sure. So just to make sure here, this is all the model. There's been no adjustments to it by either party, you or Mr. Lodenstein.
Correct, it's all model driven.
Okay. And in terms of your rent, your rents are in the most of the properties that you have here as comparables are slightly smaller, would you not say?
I agree. Well, aside from Fife, which is fairly close to the size of the subject property, but we've
Okay.
broken it down in terms of the premises.
Okay, and the majority of these, except for Notre Dame, maybe Henry and Clifton, are in Inkster Industrial.
That's
Or,
correct.
yeah. Now, in terms of your capitalization rate, your model is increasing the capitalization rate by quite a bit here. To 8.05 on the first income stream, and then again 8.05 on the second income stream. So can you give some indication as to why the model is doing that?
Probably due to the location of the subject property. As you mentioned, it's not in an industrial park.
Okay.
And on top of that, also its size as well at 118,000 square feet. It's somewhat larger.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, any questions of the assessor?
Yeah, can you please describe why there's a different rent allocated to those two spaces in income stream 2?
Yeah, it's basically just mostly due to economies of scale. They are different sizes, so economies of scale will demand different rents for them.
Okay. And I think I heard you say that this is model driven.
Correct.
So you haven't had an opportunity to visit the property?
No, I have not. I have not inspected the property.
So are we able to conclude in any way that the rent comparables being offered are similar in terms of fit and finish to the proposed rents?
So when we look at rent comparables, as on my page 7, you can see the main things we look at are the lease starts, the lease terms, the leased areas, the average wall height, effective year builds, and net rents. On top of that, we'll also take a look at land to building ratio. So here we have a land to building ratio of 2.5. My land to building ratios for my subjects, Sherwin's 1.89, Hutchings 1.98, Fife is 2.22, Church is 2.20, 1.36 for Notre Dame, 2.32 for Henry, and 1.37 for Clifton. So that's another factor we're looking at as well. In terms of fit and finish, I wouldn't know if they are similar to subject property, having not been in the subject property.
And I guess my last question then just pertains to the capitalization rate. I didn't quite follow the argument other than the model, how that 8.05 was arrived at.
Yep, so the model is going to look at the size of the building, the age of the building, the location of the building. It's going to weigh heavily on those factors. So in this instance, with this location, this is not, I would say, the best location for an industrial property. It's located right in the center of the city, basically. It's not in an industrial park. The size of the building as well is going to play effect at over 100,000 square feet. So those would be two of the factors that the model weighs.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Gail, any questions?
They've been asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay, the one. Oh, did you have another question, Jeff? Okay, the question I have again pertains to the museum. It doesn't, regardless of its classification liability, it doesn't seem to show up in your analysis. Why would that be?
We don't seem to have it in there, to be honest. So that's something, now that this has come forward, we're going to have to go inspect the building and put the museum in.
Okay, so as far as your knowledge is, then it's contained in part of the 114,000 square feet or whatever it is.
Correct. Yeah.
118,000 square feet. Okay, so it would benefit then from economies of scale. All right, so Mr. Navarro, then you can give your presentation on quantum.
Okay, so this is 555 Logan Avenue. You can see the pictures on page 6. So this is located essentially next to the Salter Bridge on the corner of, I'm not sure if they call it the Salter Bridge. Let's just call it the Salter Bridge today. Logan Avenue and possibly Isabel. And in terms of the property description, we have a property description here on page 8. So it's an industrial warehouse. It was constructed in 1987, has a gross floor area of 120,888 square feet, 24-foot wall heights. And in terms of the 2 spaces, again, we've already gotten into the school tax exemption, so I won't get into that. The site is 302,389 square feet, zoned M2, and it has a land to building ratio of 2.50 to 1. In terms of the valuation purpose, obviously we're using the income approach. On page 12, you can see the leases that we looked at. So there's 2 sets of leases and they correspond basically to the areas. So we wanted to look first at larger areas. And so we found some leases of larger properties and found an average and a median. And then we looked at smaller areas around 30,000 square feet and looked at those leases. So the lease rate that we assign to the smaller area is $6 per square foot. To the larger area, $5.50 per square foot, for a blended rent of $564 or $647, $199. In terms of vacancy allowance on that portion, 6%, shortfall 385, non-recovered is 5%. And the capitalization rate that we've utilized is 7.80. Now, in terms of the daycare evaluation, you can see it on page 15. So we have 2 spaces, or let's call it the exempted spaces. So we have 2 spaces of 3,200, which is the daycare, and the costume museum, which is 3,500 square feet, for a total of 6,700. We have a rent of $4.59 blended, 6% vacancy allowance, 385 shortfall, 7% non-recoverables, 7.80 capitalization rate, for a total value of $324,492. On page 18, you can see the blended or summarized approach for both income streams. And again, we are looking for an income adjustment to $7,238,357. Not a lot of difference. Most of it is caused by the rent itself. And the remainder of the presentation has already been presented in terms of the school tax exemption. So I am open for questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Levinson.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, Gail, any questions?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Jeff?
Sorry, I was on mute. You know what? No questions at this time. Thanks.
Okay, the question I have is, how did you arrive at 353 for the costume museum?
If you look at the INE on page 20,
1920, okay. The rent roll?
that's right. So they are paying a rent of $1,030 per month.
Okay.
Which equates to essentially $353 per month. Or yeah, $350 $3.53 per square foot.
Okay, so you're basing it on actuals then.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you for that then. Summation, Mr. Lovenstein,
I have no summation.
Marcello.
Yo, thank you.
Okay, so to keep on then with Mr. Marcello, then we have Mr. Navarro, sorry. 2340 Logan, which is item 3 on the agenda. I understand there's a recommendation coming here.
There will be, yep, just give me a moment, please. Okay, 2340 Logan Avenue, the roll number is 13096070100. We have an assessed value of $9,619,000. And I have a verbal recommendation for $9,101,000.
9,101,000.
Yep.
Okay. And could you lead us through that verbal recommendation then?
It was simply just an agreement on value between Mr. Navarro and myself.
Okay, so there was a reduced rent, reduced cap rate, or
I think for this one, I mean, the issue is that we always have different workups. So, I mean, for myself, when I did this, I looked at reducing the rental rate.
okay. And we do accept it, just both parties agreeing to the value, but we do have to have some justification for the value. All right. I take it you're accepting that valuation, Mr. Navarro?
Yes, I am.
All right. Any questions, Gail?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Jeff, any questions?
Sorry, other than mutual agreement, how was the number arrived at?
Sure, just give me a second here. This is how I came to the number. Again, Mr. Navarro may have a different workup than myself. So I reduced my mistake here. This is the wrong. Oh, well. So yeah, I reduced the rental rate from $5.17 a square foot to $4.75 a square foot. All other parameters being
Great for me. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. No other questions.
Yeah, thank you. So then we will move on to property number 7. I just got to keep track of which ones we've done. Property number 7, which is 90 Lexington Park. Let me just open the files. And we're kind of jumping around a bit to accommodate Mr. Navarro. So 90 Lexington Park. You may begin, Mr. Lovenstein.
Sure. The roll number is 04007265 90 Lexington Park, and the assessed value is $20,762,000. I spoke to Mr. Navarro about this, and I believe he's going to be seeking confirmation for this one. If that's still happening.
Mr. Navarro, are you seeking confirmation?
Yes, we spoke ahead of time. There are a couple of appeals at the municipal board for the 2018 and 2020 cycles. So we essentially agreed to deal with these things at the municipal board. And we did consult with the client about the confirmation as well.
Okay. Any questions from the panel?
I have no questions.
All right, so then we have item 8, which is 901 Regent. Okay, so can you lead us through 901 Regent?
Sure, there'll be a recommendation for this one as well. So the roll number is 09007400100901 Regent Avenue. The assessed value is $4,729,000. And I have a recommendation for $4,334,000.
334?
Yes, $4,334,000.
Yep, okay. And what was that again, based on reduced rate or
Yeah,
rent? Or-
A reduced rate from $5.99 a square foot to $5.50 a square foot.
Okay.
515?
$5.50, yeah, $5.50.
Okay, and how do you feel about that number, Mr. Navarro?
We've already spoken about this one ahead of time, so we're good with it.
All right. Any questions from the panel?
No question.
All right, so then we will move on to 14, item 10, 1417 Dugald. Let me just open the file. Okay, 1417 Dugald Road. You can begin.
Again, I have a recommendation for this one. So 060529611100 is the road number. The address is 1417 Dougal Road. The assessed value is $5,182,000. And I have a verbal recommendation for $4,915,000.
That's 4915.
That's correct.
Okay. And again, based on,
A reduction in rental rate from $7.69 a square foot to $7.30 a square foot.
okay, Mr. Navarro, how do you feel about that number?
We're okay with that number. Thank you.
Okay. Again, any questions from the panel on that one?
Thank you.
All right. So we'll close up these ones. And we will go on to, does anybody need a brief break right now? I guess we have to bring in another participant. 170 Salto Crescent is the next property.
We are disconnecting the applicant now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm Marcelo. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcel.
Okay.
Just waiting for the applicant to come on camera.
Okay.
And Mr. Slaughter, please state your full name.
Rod Slaughter.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So on 170, good afternoon, Rob. How you doing?
Great. Thank you.
170 Salto Crescent, Mr. Lobenstein, you can begin.
Sure. The roll number is 07560168200170 Salto Crescent. We have an assessed value of $16,899,000. Going down the property description, there's three premises, 2 buildings. The actual years built we have ranging from 1999 to 2021. There was an extensive renovation on this property, which I'll get into. The wall heights range from 20 feet to 42 feet. The zoning's M2. We have a land area of 239,613 square feet. The gross floor in the leasable area are 143,513 square feet, for a land to plan of 1.76. Moving to my page 2, you can see the requests for income information. They are compliant. The mailer is in the addenda. So on page 3, you can see a map of 170 Salto Crescent. It's located in the Murray Industrial Park, kind of off Moray in the St. James area near the airport. So on the bottom of my page 3, you can see what the property looked like before the renovation, just to give you an idea. And then on my page 4, you can see the renovation, the attachments that they've done. So, or the addition they added, I should say. In terms of the addition, this is in 2021. So they added 52,592 square feet to the existing manufacturing building. The leasable area before this was 90,921 square feet. After the addition, it came up to 143,513 square feet. So you can see, so this is an interesting property where although these pictures don't show it best, they actually have access through other properties, property directly in front of this building, and to the side they have access. But with the renovation, it looks like they gained access to the road behind it as well. Some narrow access on either side of the building. You can sort of see that on my page 5 and page 4 as well. So moving forward, we're going to go to my page 6, and this is the income workup. So we have a total area of 143,513 square feet. We've broken that up into the new building at 52,592 square feet, the older portion at 83,272 square feet, and then a mezzanine space at 7,649 square feet. Excuse me. So this gives us a total potential rent of 1,302,468. We're applying a 3.5% vacancy. Our expenses of 3% at a capitalization rate of 7.10%. We have a net operating income of 1,199,838 square feet. When we apply our capitalization rate, we get a capitalized value of $16,899,000. So looking further down to my page 7, you can see the rent comparables. The rent comparables, these are actually net rents in the market. Our model is based off the market, so our model will be based off rents such as these. When looking at our rent comparables, we're looking for similar leased areas, wall heights, effective year built, and of course we want to see that it's at market. So we're looking for leases that are close to market and with a normal term. So in this instance, we have leased areas ranging from 47,000 square feet all the way up to 136,000 square feet. The average wall heights range from 22 feet all the way up to 28 feet. And the effective years built range from 1969 all the way up to 2014. And then our net rents range from $8 a square foot all the way up to $9.95 a square foot. Our lease terms range from 2005, which I believe are step ups for 200 Beijing and debates there, all the way up to 2019. So they are fairly recent, especially the 2019 and 2018 ones. The lease terms range from 4 years, sorry, all the way up to 18 years. And just moving to my page 9, you can see the capitalization rate chart. The industrial one is second from the top, the 20th to the 80th percentile, where the majority of capitalization rates fall within the city, or 5.5 to 7.45. And with the property at 7.10, this falls between the 20th and the 80th percentile, although on the higher range. And the reason it's on the higher range due to the size of the property. This is also supported by some outside sources. You can see the charts next to it, and these range from 5.75 up to 7.25. That's on page 9. If you go to page 13, there was a permit for this property. You can see the declared construction value for $13 million for the new addition that they put on. And then starting on page 14, there was an inspection done of this property. So you can see the page 14, the outside of the property, the outside loading areas, the front foyer area, upstairs to the office space on the second floor. On page 17, you can see another shot of the office space, and then you can start seeing the industrial part on the bottom of page 17. You can see the shipping areas on page 18 and 19. Apparently there was an issue with the floors here. I did not inspect this building, a coworker did, so apparently there's been some shifting between the 1999 area and the 2004 area. You can see this is the original 1999 building on page 21. There's a utility room for the electrical as well. Let's go down to page 25 here. You can see the new machinery in the new building portion of it. And on page 26, there's just one final overhead shot of the property. So we feel that the value of $60,899,000 is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lovenstein. I just do have a few questions. You went through most of the items fairly thoroughly. The approach being taken to value the property is the income approach solely. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And the market rent that you mentioned is being applied, I guess you broke it down into 3 different areas, but to be clear, this is one building, correct?
Yeah, it is one building. Yep.
Okay. And that blended rent is, I believe, the blended rent is $9.08 a square foot across 143,000 square feet, correct?
Sorry, I just calculated it out. Yeah, that's correct.
And would you agree that that is a 35% increase in the rent that the city applied for the supplementary assessment last cycle?
Yeah, the supplementary. So the supplementary, we came in at $14,482,000 and it's cut to $12,303,000. Yep.
Yeah, correct. And the market rent was reduced as well. So my question is, do you think that's a reasonable increase in the market rent? It's actually 42% over what the board applied. Is that reasonable between April 18 and April 21, in your opinion?
Well, we're using, so the reference period's a 3-year reference period. So it was increased. So I guess that'd be 10% for each year for the 3 years. So I would say that is somewhat reasonable, yes.
Okay. Your comparisons that you had, you'd agree that only one is over 100,000 square feet and closer in size to the subject property. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do that because this is how we have it broken up for our premises due to the ages of the property. So we need to show that the model, that's how the model is calculating it. So these would be sort of similar comparables the model would be looking at. So it's not looking at an overall square footage. It'll be breaking it up into how the premises are.
Okay, thanks. And in your experience, what's a typical land to building ratio for an industrial manufacturing facility?
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree that this is lower than a typical industrial building. Usually you want to be looking at 3. A 3 ratio would be considered a good ratio. But it should also be considered that, you know, it is more economical for, particularly with M2 zoning, to build out the property, as they can't do. M3 zoning allows a lot more manufacturing out on the lot or storage on the lot than M2. So for M2 zoning, it makes sense to build out the property.
Okay, so we've got a few factors here. You mentioned a couple as well, the fact that it's essentially accessed only over a separate property. With that, the smaller land to building ratio and the larger size, but all of these have an influence on the market rent applied, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, so initially, definitely, before the addition was put in, you can see they had on my page 3, they had no access unless they were going through a property. I'm surprised that even though they built out the renovation, it looks like they put in some access to the rear there where they can get trucks in and cars in, although I would agree it's very narrow. It's not great.
No, that's actually wrong, Mr. Levenstein. They don't have permission to have truck access off Wahari.
They don't have permission to get trucks, so.
No.
Because I'm seeing on my page 5, they have a truck loading there. And on my bottom page.
No, you can see that the
26.
building is basically right up against Wahuri. The only loading in the facility is on the west side, the west side. 3 dock loading and 1 grade.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just going by the picture, and you can see on my page 26, there's an open door. There's a truck there, and it looks like it's a tough picture to see on my computer. When I zoom in, it looks like people are unloading and loading there. So with access going out to the rear road. And again, this is a picture. I did not inspect this property, so.
Yeah, no, I've been through the property many times, and if it might be a rear exit door, but not a loading door per se.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that is all the questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Gail, any questions of this?
Just in regards to the assessment, is it all model generated, the assessment?
Correct. Yes, it's all model generated.
Okay, and the cap rate, you said it is at the level that's indicated of 7.10, given that it's the size of the building, how large it is?
Yeah, I mean, so it's at the higher end of the 20th to 80th percentile due to the size of it, but it's also a fairly modern building. So built between, well, we have effective years and built between 1999 and 2021. So, I mean, that's probably why it would be within that range. If the building was older in this size, it'd probably be out of the 80 or into the 80th percentile.
Mm-hmm. What type of business is operated out of that facility?
You know, I didn't inspect the building. I'm not totally sure what they manufacture.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jeff, any questions?
In terms of the size of the premises of the rent comparables, were there no other rent comparables in larger buildings? I look at the 200 Bayhan Avenue as being a meaningful comp, but I wonder about some of the others.
Sure. I mean, there would definitely be other larger comparables within the city of Winnipeg. There's going to be not as many larger comparables due to the age of this building being such a modern building. A lot of them were going to be built in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, so they would be much older and not as good as a comparable. And again, we've broken this up with the premises due to the age of the building, so that's how I've displayed my rent comparables today.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Okay, the question I have is on the breakup of the rentable areas. Are there physical separations between the two? Are they separately rentable or anything like that?
So my understanding from the pictures that are here is that, for example, on page 20, there seems to be a separation between the 1990 and the 2004 areas. My coworker put on here, and then there looks like there's also a separation between the new part, the 2021 part, and and the original building. Now, how that is separated in there, where you can gain access, I can't say. But nonetheless, that is how we separated it.
Okay, but I guess the question then that I have is, a buyer would have to be looking to buy 143,000 square feet, not 50,000 or 80,000 or whatever the breakup is. Is that?
Sure, but yeah, I agree with the question is then can they demise it if they wanted to in a way where they could facilitate other tenants? So yeah, I would agree they'd have to buy the whole building.
Okay. All right. Thank you on that. Okay, Mr. Slaughter, then on your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some rebuttal evidence as well. Would you prefer that I go through the direct first?
Direct first, then followed by rebuttal. We'll do direct questions and then rebuttal and questions.
Sure. Thank you. So if I could ask the panel, please, to turn to the document labeled 2023 Realty Assessment for 170 Soto Crescent. Sorry, I have an echo here. I'm going to try and figure out why.
Probably somebody's microphone is catching the speakers.
Okay, if it's not bothering anybody, I'll just continue on then. Don't think it's on this end. Okay, so there's some photographs of the subject property. I'll ask the panel, please, you can go ahead and please turn to page 6. And there's some overhead photos. Mr. Laubenstein gave a good description of the property, but I wanted to walk through a bit of the history. This has been a long-standing client, which is why I'm joining in the docket today. First off, to the question asked, what do they do here? So this is American Biaxis, and they make what's called biaxially oriented polyimide, which is a nylon film used in food packaging. So it's a very thin plastic. They use it for, when you buy a frozen pizza, it'll be covered in that, things such as that. So they have these large production lines. And historically, there was one large production line. So if you take a look at the property on page 6, the overhead photo, the one at the bottom is the property before the recent addition. And there are a few points that are very important in the valuation of this property, Mr. Chairman, that we've described in the past when we've had the property under appeal. The first one is, you can notice that from Soto on the west, which is the main access road, you actually don't see it on this photo, but it's to the western edge. To access the property, you have to go across the adjacent property, 100 Soto. Now, there was common ownership between them. At this point, American Biaxis is 49% owned by Winpac, who is the owner of the next door property. But this is definitely a concern if the owners of American Biaxis were ever to try and market their property. There would have to be an easement across 100 Soto. And as soon as you hear anything about easements when accessing a property, that is an influence on risk. So you come across from Soto along 100 Soto, and then you reach 170 Soto, the subject. And you can see the access point there on the west side. The parking lot is small for this property. It was small before their addition. They have 56 stalls. In fact, they had to get a variance from the city of Winnipeg to allow for that few parking stalls on the site. Second bit of a risk. The third is there are only 3 dock level loading doors on that west side. You can see 3 trucks there outside on the west side, and there is 1 grade level. So that means the access for all goods comes in on the west side. And when you come in the facility from the west side, you will have a small office area on the main floor and then on the second floor as well. And behind the office and to the north of the office is the beginning of the manufacturing / warehouse of the facility. And so they had the one large line that stretched basically north-south inside. And the warehousing, of course, was where the loading docks are on the west side. In 2004, they expanded to a second line and they put on the addition that you can kind of see at the bottom of page 6. That it's a thinner, lighter color. Now, when they built the building in 1999, this is on swampland in Murray Park, and it should have been piled completely. But what was done is they only piled the exterior walls and the foundation beneath the equipment. And over time, what started to happen is a heaving of the floors. And I've seen this over the last 2 inspections. Mr. Froelich from the city of Winnipeg attended with me at the last inspection about a month ago. And the owners pointed out to us again how as the floor heaves, the underground cabling has actually become separated at times. So they've had to get pretty creative about trying to stabilize some of the conduits because of the heaving floor. And this has been a major problem in the existing facility. Now, they shut down the first of the 2 lines. Not quite, it's about to be shut down. And these are massive pieces of equipment. You will see at the bottom of page 6, this is very important to the story of the property's construction. At the bottom of page 6, the space between the edge of the existing building and Wihuri Road is relatively small. In fact, it is 24 meters to the edge of the site. When they needed to expand to this 3rd line, because the first line was shutting down, technology has changed and the line's a bit bigger. They would need 30 meters to fit the line as they do in the other 2 lines, kind of straight across north to south. They didn't have enough room. So what they had to do is build the addition, instead of being like this, with the conduits for electricity and such running along the sides, they built the building like this. And they have all of the mechanical systems running above the equipment now and below. Actually, there's kind of a dugout below the addition. The costs escalated greatly. I think it's best, rather than I describing this, I'm going to quote the client, because we've talked about this at length and they sent me an email on this. And he says, had we had 6 more meters of width, built at 24 meters, needed 30 plus meters, we could have saved the costs associated with the underground utilidor, mechanical mezzanine, building height, staggered columns, roof cantilever, additional fire rated walls, etc. We also built the structural floor due to site conditions, primarily the fact that this is previous swampland. So they had to build like this. The costs went through the roof. This is the number. Well, first of all, it's agreed that we're not valuing the property on the cost approach. So the market doesn't really care what it would have cost to build an addition. But if we were looking at the cost approach, that has to be recognized, because this is not how the facility would be built if they had a chance to start again. And that's how you value on the cost approach, is using a replacement cost model. It was interesting that now you can see at the top of page 6, the building goes right up against Wihuri. And there is no vehicular access off Wihuri. It's not allowed. It's road's too small. And they are now stuck. They have nowhere else to build or grow. And what you end up having then is this area with the higher ceiling height simply for the equipment. But it's not the warehousing area. The warehousing area, again, is where the loading docks are on the west side. So the whole building has a very inefficient layout, which to their credit, I think American Bioaccess has done some brilliant work to make it suit their needs. They actually bring in the small plastic beads that are used for the BOPA, and they have this kind of system that pulls them up and through and piping and brings them over to the other side and dumps them down into containers, because their loading is on the wrong side. In addition, the city of Winnipeg had to do aesthetic work because they're right up against Wihuri now. This typically would not be allowed. They had to have many variances through city council to allow this to happen. It is not an ideal construction. So we go through some pictures then on page 7. We have the exterior from the west side showing the office. And then looking down along the south end of the building, you'll see the addition at the back with the higher ceiling height. We have pictures on page 8 of the new addition. You can see the equipment running down the middle. And basically, it looks identical to the legacy building, except higher ceiling, because they had to build it that way because they didn't have enough width. We have some pictures of the foundation issues in the legacy building, the heaving. And at the bottom, you can see the minimal setback.
Can we take just a short break here?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's resume. Again, Mr. Slaughter, you're on your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I was just on page 9, finishing up kind of the story of the development of the property over the years, and what we believe to be some important facts that we need to consider in the valuation of the property. So on page 9, the last picture is, this is looking out of the small exit door, looking north along Wahuri. You can see how close it is to the road, and yes, there's no vehicular access allowed off of that road. North of the subject property is actually DND, federally owned land. This is right near the Air Force Base. Because I asked the question, is it possible to acquire some more land to the north so that you may be able to get access? And the answer was no. Plus, they wouldn't be able to get a proper curb cut. So that basically sums up the property, Mr. Chairman. On page 10, I have a written description of the facility. But what, in the end, if I may summarize, what we have is a 143,000 square foot manufacturing facility that does have some foundation issues, that has an extremely small, for industrial manufacturing anyway, land to building ratio, has an inefficient layout, and is set back from its main access point, Soto, requiring access over an adjacent property. These are all factors that I think need to be considered. Now, I know we are not to speak about previous decisions, but it was just 1 year ago that we came before the board because the supplementary assessment was issued last cycle. And that was mentioned in the questioning with Mr. Laubenstein. I have that board order at the end on page 30 and 31.
I will caution that past valuations are of limited guidance.
Certainly.
But
Thank
go
you, Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to state that, this is basically the same story, which is very important when we look at the valuation of the property. Same, different reference date, but same basic argument. So on page 14, we agree that the income approach is the best approach to use as per decisions by the municipal board and the courts. And we look to market rents from 9 different what we feel are somewhat comparable properties. Now, again, I mentioned that the blended market rent was reduced to $6.41 last cycle. The current applied market rent is 42% increase over that amount, which I don't think is reasonable. On the bottom of page 14, we have the comparisons. And for the panel's reference, we have photographs of each one starting on page 21. So I'll just quickly go through these, Mr. Chairman. Index 1 is, it's an older rent, but I think it's very interesting. It's a light manufacturing plant for the aerospace industry. It was built in 1982 and 1998, steel frame and walls, 20-foot wall height. So this was a very good comparison to the legacy building for the subject property, the 90,000 square feet before the addition. It has a small office mezzanine as well, 2 dock and 2 grade loading doors, excellent electrical capacity with 2 transformers, 2,500 amps, 7% office area. There was a 16,000 square foot clean room. Land to building ratio was 1.5 to 1, and the access was off an adjacent property. I mean, this is actually an ideal comparison for the property before the expansion. And long story short, the rent paid for this property, even though they were asking $650 rent, they ended up only acquiring $542, and the rent ended in 2018 at which time the tenant purchased the property. And they purchased the property for what equated to $54.84 a square foot. If the board was curious, the implied cap rate off of that transaction would have been 8.44%. So that is the first comparison. An older lease, but otherwise I thought a very interesting comparison. The second is on Pennant Road in Transcona. We're getting closer now to the subject property size. This is 95,000 square feet, single occupant facility built in 1996. 30-foot wall height, 2.25 to 1 land to building ratio. And the rent paid there is $575 a square foot on a 2017 step up. The third comparison is on Fife in Inkster Park. This is 108,187 square foot warehouse. It has 31-foot wall height. It's older. It was built in 1979. It has office area on the main and second, much like the subject property. The 1,930 square foot mezzanine is not part of the leasable area. This is common with industrial properties that oftentimes mezzanine is not part of the rent calculation. And so the new lease that was signed in March 2020 for this property, which has a 2.2 to 1 land to building ratio, was $5.38 a square foot. Number 4 is another interesting property. It has an effective age of 1990. It is an older property, but it was completely redone for the tenant's requirements, the tenant being Boeing, who actually also have a facility in Murray Park near the subject property. It's on Redwood and Inkster Park. It's 111,763 square feet. It has 22-foot wall height and a large land to building ratio for manufacturing of 3.86 to 1. So it has ample parking. Again, this was redone completely for Boeing for this lease, and they're paying $7.20 a square foot. The 5th comparison is also on Sargent Avenue, like the very first comparison. It's 113,864 square foot office warehouse over 2 properties. This is occupied by a courier, one of the large main courier companies. Has 6,755 square feet of office. It has a very large land to building ratio of 6.61 to 1, and the maximum ceiling height is 24 feet. The rent here, Mr. Chairman, stepped up to $6.36 a square foot. That is age now, though. The 6th comparison is on Inkster Boulevard. It's a multi-tenant property. This particular unit is 134,664 square feet. We are including this because we're trying to stay closer in comparability with regards to size, but it would not be the best comparison overall. The rent there is $5.42 a square foot. 7th comparison is exactly the same comparison as used by the city. And I'd like to talk a bit about the city's rents in my rebuttal, but this one is shared by both parties. And it's a very interesting comparison because it is a similar sort of industry. Very similar property, actually, but the differences are it was also built in 2 stages with an effective age of 2003. It's 136,101 square feet, 27-foot ceiling height, 2.5 to 1 land building ratio. So a good comparison, but it doesn't have any of the negative factors, which I described at the very beginning, that the subject property has. So in our opinion, the subject property would definitely command a market rent that would be slightly less than that attained for the property on Began. The 8th comparison is on Burmack Road. It is 160,000 square feet. So now we're getting just a bit larger than the subject property. Has an office area of 17%. The effective age is now 1990. There is a 2,460 square foot mezzanine, which is not part of the area included in the lease rent. The wall height is up to 25 feet, and the land to building ratio here is 5.31 to 1. It has a very, very large parking lot for staff. And the lease paid is $5.85 a square foot. And the last comparison is larger than the subject. It is 228,484 square feet of what was considered the Cadillac warehouse in its time on Sony Place, completely HVAC throughout. And the rent here had gone up to $6.33 a square foot in January 2019. The wall height is up to 34 feet. So the average of our comparisons, Mr. Chairman, is $6.19 a square foot. We feel the best comparisons are number 1, 4, and 8. And so based on the above and considering the site-specific attributes that I discussed earlier, we feel that a market rent of no more than $7.50 a square foot should be applied. And we do apply an additional market rent to the mezzanine area because it is office finish for the most part, not all of it, but for the most part. But because it doesn't have elevator access, precedent is that we typically apply a lower rent to that area. We apply $4.50 a square foot. Our blended rent, therefore, Mr. Chairman, is $7.34 a square foot. And that still is quite an escalation over the rent that was applied for the previous cycle. The only other differences, Mr. Chairman, in our valuation in the cities are minor. One is that the expenses in this property are higher than typical industrial properties. They're higher than $5 a square foot. So we increased the shortfall rate, which doesn't make a big difference, but we increased that to $5 a square foot from $3.85. And the second difference is with the non-recovered allowance. And I believe all on the panel has heard Altus talk about the non-recovered expenses. So I'll ask Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go through that document or just summarize?
Just summarize it.
Thank you. In our separate documentation, we go through the rationale of the non-recovered allowance, which is recognizing basically all expenses that in a typical fee simple market rent would not be recovered. And this is found, according to our study, in all types of properties, including industrial. And the reason is that if we do a market rent approach, we have to hypothesize that at some point there would be space marketing costs. And that's what a good portion of the non-recovered allowance is. The main point, Mr. Chairman, is that when we determine our capitalization rates in our capitalization rate study, we use the same methodology, which is very, very important in valuation, as we do in the valuation of the subject property, as we do here. In other words, we apply 7% non-recovered expenses to the market net operating incomes of our comparables that we're looking at to derive capitalization rates. If we only applied 3%, as the city applies, all of our capitalization rates that we have determined would be higher because all of the net operating incomes would be higher. So in order to stay apples to apples, which is very important in valuation, we ask that the board apply the 7% allowance, which is a consideration over the life of the property. This is why it's an allowance, not an actual expense item. And at the very end, Mr. Chairman, we have our capitalization rate examples, and they are hovering from 6.5 to 9.16%. I wouldn't count that one as a valid comparison for the subject. But overall, we feel that the city's application of 7.1% is appropriate. It does recognize some of the risk factors I mentioned at the beginning. But again, if the non-recovered allowance that we are requesting is not applied, we would ask that the capitalization rate be increased. So on page 19, to summarize, the main difference, Mr. Chairman, is with the market rent. We feel that the city's rent is quite excessive based on both subject properties assessment history and market evidence when considering site-specific considerations. And then we have a slightly different shortfall rate and non-recovered expense allowance. And that brings our value as of April 2021 to $12,961,000. I don't think there's anything else I need to touch upon, Mr. Chairman. In the appendix, again, there's photographs of each of the comparable properties and the aforementioned board order from the last supplementary assessment. So I will end my presentation there. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Lappenstein, questions?
Yeah, on page 16, you mentioned that your best comparables are 1, 4, and 8. But then you also mentioned index 7 being a very similar type of property in terms of size, its age, and what they manufacture. My question, why would that not be your best comparable?
It's a good question. It should be. It should be the 4, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a superior property, but a very good comparison overall.
I think those are all my questions.
All right, Gail, any questions?
I have a couple of questions. The shortfall that you propose of $5, Rod, can you advise me again what that relates to? Why the request from the 385 that the city applies? Sure.
The shortfall allowance refers to the expenses incurred with a property that typically can be recovered in a lease. So what we're doing, of course, is evaluating the property on a hypothetical income approach with a hypothetical market rent that we feel is appropriate. And in that scenario, this being a net rent, there would be expenses that the tenant would have to pay. Now, the vacancy allowance suggests that over the life of the property, you will likely have X amount of time where you will be losing your base rent because it's vacant. And at that time, you also lose your recoverable expenses because nobody's there to pay it. So the shortfall allowance should have a fairly close relationship to the actual expenses incurred at the property, that being taxes and your utilities, snow clearing, et cetera, et cetera. And the subject property has a higher electrical requirement than many other industrial properties. And so we saw from the income statements that their actual expenses are closer to $5 a square foot or higher than that, I believe. And we felt that an increase was warranted.
Okay, thanks for that. My other question relates to the foundation issues that were identified. So the foundation issues that have been identified are in the original building, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so they were identified before a decision was made to undertake an extensive renovation and addition, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and so all the measures have been undertaken that the owner is interested in undertaking to remedy those foundation issues. Am I correct?
Not in the existing building, but in the new addition, they don't have what they had, which was a structural piled floor system only under the equipment and the external walls. So they've rectified the situation in the addition.
Okay, but in the original building, they haven't done any, like they're not undertaking any work in that regard, or have an estimate of any remedial work that needs to be undertaken? Like it's
No,
they're going to
no,
leave it as is. Okay.
yeah, they do what I call Band-Aid solutions. So they've kind of reinforced their conduits for electrical equipment. They've actually also now they have some of the electrical go up and over because they're worried that when they had the heaving before, it actually cracked those electrical conduits. So they've made do very well with the legacy building, but they've learned their lesson for the addition, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, any questions?
I don't at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I thought this property seemed familiar, and I see my name on the previous decision. But also in disclosure, I was working on 200 Salto while they started building this property originally in
That's right.
1999. So
Yeah.
I have no questions on this one. So summation, Mr. Lobenstein.
I don't have this. Oh, we have a rebuttal though. No.
Oh, rebuttal. Yes. Mr. Slaughter also had rebuttal, so we'll deal with his rebuttal first, and then we will deal with your rebuttal. And so, Mr. Slaughter, your rebuttal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a separate document. It looks very similar to the first, but it says rebuttal evidence, third line down. So I'll just wait for the panel to confirm they have that document.
Let me just.
It will be at the bottom of your SharePoint for my panel members.
Okay, 4 minutes ago. All right, I have it.
Okay, thank you. So this is just to bring a little bit more light to the city's comparisons. I spent a lot of time talking about our 9 comparisons and had photographs, and I wanted to do a bit of the same here. And I'll try and make this quick, Mr. Chairman. The first comparison by the city is 1777 Ellis. This is also a client of ours. In fact, I was at this facility not too long ago. It's more of a commercial location. It's right on Ellis between St. James and, on Ellis between Barrie and King Edward. It's occupied by Napa Auto Parts. It has a retail portion and then the distribution warehouse, which has full HVAC. The location, I think, is a very different sort of location, Mr. Chairman, and I think that is what's I know that's what's driving the rent that they're paying there. So I don't think this is. I should caution myself. It's not that Mr. Lobenstein's comparisons aren't good. It's very difficult to find good comparisons, but there are things about that comparison I'd take with caution. Let's say that for the subject property, which is quite set back. The second is 15 Scurfield. This had been occupied by Grandin Toy. Again, this is a client of ours as their distribution warehouse. It is now occupied by Gordon Food Services. It has a nice 2-story office in the front, about 13% of the area, so quite large, 28-foot wall height, very good land size, 3.4:1 land to building ratio, ample parking. That's on their marketing brochure when it was vacant. And the rent step up is at $9. So I think this is, again, based on the site specific considerations I talked about with the subject, this should be commanding more than the subject property. The third is the one that we share, that's 200 Beg, and I think this is a very good comparison, but it doesn't have some of those concerns that the subject property has. So again, $8 I think is, and to Mr. Lobenstein's point, yes, it should have been one of my best comparisons, but I think the subject should be slightly less. Next is 1221 Sherwin. This is not a very good comparison, but the main thing about it, Mr. Chairman, is that this must be a gross rent. And the reason I say that is that it has been assessed historically at around $6 a square foot. In fact, that's what's being used by the city for the 2023 assessment. You can see the business assessment on the following page. But the most important thing about this rent, Mr. Chairman, is that this property is one of our cap rate comparisons. And we had used a market rent in our determination. You can see our calculations here on page 4. We had used $6.25 a square foot as market rent. And again, back to my point about the non-recovered expenses, you'll see that applied. This is what I was referring to, that we use the non-recovered expenses so that we're apples to apples. Anyway, the point being is, if the rent was actually $9.57 net for this property, our cap rate would have been 11.47%. So I have a feeling, and this does happen sometimes, that owners may not be clear when they're submitting their income expense mailers, but this is not a property that would command $9.57 a foot. So I'd use some caution there. The next comparison is a fairly good comparison, 350 debates. You can see, though, at the bottom of page 5, it is a very, very large compound. The land to building ratio is 5.37 to 1. It's otherwise very good comparison. And the last two comparisons are at a relatively new property, which are in the new Inksbrook Industrial Park. That has a different name. I can't remember now. But these are kind of the new Cadillac of distribution warehouses. High ceiling height, great loading. You can see all the loading at the back. A lot of tenant inducement work went into these rents. The first, again, this is a client of ours. The first tenant that's used as one of the comparisons is Staples Distribution Center. They had about $800,000 put in by the landlord. And the second of the comparison is TFI Transport, and they had about $100,000 put in. So this is, in my opinion, a quite superior property. So to summarize, the main thing about these comparisons, and it was alluded to it near the beginning by the panel, that a lot of these most of these comparisons are less than half the size of the subject property. And I think there are factors about these, which I hope the panel sees now, that make them, in my opinion, superior in most cases. The best comparison, again, is 200 Began, but we should be south of that. So I think all in all, when we look at the universal comparisons by both the city and ourselves, I do feel confident about the market rent being applied by Altus. And that's all for the rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, questions on the rebuttal?
I don't have any questions on the rebuttal. I think that the rebuttal sort of indicates the importance of effective year built. You know, when you're looking at properties that are built in 2022, you want to have comparable properties that are similar ages. So in terms of the rank comparables I have, you see the 2014 and the 2005 and 2000 and 2001. Those are important rank comparables to look at when you're looking at more modern buildings.
Okay, Gail, any questions on Mr. Slaughter's rebuttal?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Jeff, any questions?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I have no questions either. So, Mr. Robinson, I believe you indicated you had a rebuttal as well?
No, I don't have any rebuttal. No.
Oh, okay.
I was just alluding to Mr. Slaughter's rebuttal.
Oh, all right. Sorry. All right. So we will move on then to, looks like item 6. Correct me, Stephen, if I'm, Mr. Lunn, if I've missed one. Item 6 is 419 Chalmers.
Yeah, that's the last one on today's docket.
Mr. Slaughter.
Yeah, I'll step away. Thank you very much, everybody. And thanks very much, Stephen.
Take care, Ron.
Yeah, take care.
And Mr. Story, you've connected okay, and you can hear us okay? Mr. Story, please state your full name.
My name is Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Levinson, 419 Chalmers, you can begin.
Well, there is class and liability on this one, so.
Oh,
we'll have to
class and
start.
liability again?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Story then on class and liability then.
Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, so just very quickly, the property that we're dealing with here is 419 Chalmers Avenue. I suppose I'll read the file number into the record.
Yes, yep.
Yes. Okay, so the roll number first is 14082095000, file number 22-2520. So the property that we're looking at today is the Kildonan MCC Community Assistance Center. We had previously requested that this property be exempt from taxation under section 53(1), as it provides assistance to to folks who would be considered indigent, the poor, or the needy. Now that so it's sort of an interesting scenario, Mr. Chair. Our request was part of a supplementary assessment. I have provided the decision into evidence as rebuttal. I'm careful not to look at the previous quantum, but just so you are aware, the panel did rule in our favor in terms of exempting this property, in that it gives relief to the aged, sick, or indigent. That class code did not appear to carry forward for this cycle, and that may very well be a question of timing. So I will give you this presentation again. We've been provided our materials into rebuttal in terms of some of the cases that we reference, but ultimately, the reason why we requested this is because the primary and dominant purpose carried out at the property at 419 Chalmers is to serve the global and local relief efforts of the Mennonite Central Committee. The property is owned indeed by a charitable organization, primarily for the purpose of, as I mentioned, giving relief or assistance to indigent persons. Again, indigent meaning just the poor or the needy. The operation is a not-for-profit thrift store. It's dedicated to community assistance. There are over 350 volunteers who sort, clean, and price donated essential items. Those items are then made available at a low cost to people in need. If you look on my page 6, I have the summary, and you can see that they're designated or typified as a charity engaged in the relief of poverty, and then categorized as organizations relieving poverty / operating a food bank. So they do fall under that that designation. We have their registration number, and you can see that that is who they are and what they do. Now, just very quickly, the MCC does employ a small staff to run the operation, with some employees and volunteers coming to them by way of local social employment agencies such as Seed Winnipeg, that's Seeking Employment and Economic Development, Opportunities for Employment, and WASO. So these are not-for-profit social agencies who assist folks who have barriers to work. So basically, I include that here because it does show the overall holistic approach of the goings-on of the charitable environment of the organization. Okay, the operations of this facility are an integral part of the fulfillment of those objectives, and I've mentioned some of the programs that these folks are engaged in. I've included a printout for you. I think we're all well aware of MCC and what they do. And I guess most importantly here is that any funds in excess of the cost of operating the facility are solely channeled to the MCC's initiatives, which again are to further assist indigent and sick persons globally and locally. So we are suggesting and requesting here once again that the classification be amended to reflect that the property is indeed owned by or is held in trust for and used by a charitable organization primarily for the purpose of giving relief or assistance to aged, indigent, or sick persons to a maximum exemption of 0.81 hectares. And that again is per section 23(1) of the Municipal
Okay.
Assessment Act. Yep.
Can you direct me to the board decision on this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so it was submitted. Stephen, do you have that available for the panel. I suppose it was.
The decision or the.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen, the clerk, not.
Oh, sorry.
Other
Was that your
Stephen.
rebuttal evidence?
Item 11.
Sorry, Chair, Mr. Sir, was that your rebuttal evidence that you sent in earlier today?
No, this would have been sent a little while ago. So it's a board order dated, going by memory, but I believe it's June 2nd. And it does indeed show the class code change on the 2021 supplementary was accepted.
Board should have it. I just want to confirm, actually, it looks like we lost the panel member just a second ago. So if we could take a 2-minute recess to troubleshoot that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now we're dealing with a class and liability, but Mr. Story, before you go further, in light of this Board of Revision order, I'm going to ask Mr. Lobenstein, has the city appealed the classification and liability on this property?
Yeah, it's been appealed up to the Court of King's Bench.
But for today's hearing, have they appealed it?
No, I mean the subsequent appeal for the
2000
the
for
2000
this.
yeah, the supplementary, that decision was appealed to the higher courts. This one,
Okay, that decision was, but has the current has for the 2023 valuation, did the city appeal the class and liability?
no, I mean the class and liability still comes up as taxable, so that was not 60 tax, the 60T. So that
Okay.
was, yeah.
But according to the board order, the current classification is 40E. So
for
without
the 20,
you may have appealed that to both the municipal board and or the Court of King's Bench, but without an appeal on this particular instance, then isn't the class and liability 40E?
as far as I know, we have it as 60T on here. I agree. I'm not too sure if it should be 40E or 60T for 2023. It was changed in 2021 to exempt. So Mr. Story and I have already talked about this. I haven't found the reasoning for that yet.
Okay, but well, I guess that's something the panel is going to have to consider, but the board's previous decision was 40E, and without a appeal from the city for this year, doesn't it remain 40E?
Again, I'm not too sure why we have it as 60T. That's something that I'm trying to find out.
Okay. Mr. Sturry, is there anything you wish to add on class and liability?
Sorry, it was on mute there, sir. No, I think I've got everything included in my brief here. I think we get the gist, but I guess maybe just the final page of my brief, just so we're all clear. The Government of Canada, we do have that. We have that entry for Kildonan MCC Community Assistance Center Inc., and it does indeed show that they're a registered charity, designated as a public foundation, typified under the to give relief of poverty. So I'm not going to belabor that. So I think I'll leave it there. You're quite correct, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure why this class code was changed. My guess is that it has something to do with the timing, because the board ordered on the previous supplementary. Perhaps the role was set. I'm not sure, but I think you're quite correct. We found it a bit odd that the current status is not commensurate with the previous board order, but I think I'll leave it there. And I thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lamsey, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Gail, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Jeff, any questions on class and liability?
I have none, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lobenstein on class and liability then?
I'm just gonna, since this has been appealed to the higher court, I'm not gonna present any information on class and liability right now.
All right, thank you for that. So we'll reserve on class and liability. The board will discuss it. So on quantum, Mr. Levinson.
Again, my coworker Ryan San Juan will be doing the presentation. I'll do the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll go ahead. Roll number is 14082095000. Address is 419 Chalmers Avenue. Roll year 2023. Reference date April 1st, 2021. Assessed value is $3,411,000. Number of buildings 6. Number of premises 2. Number of stories 1. Actual year built is 1907 to 2021. That would be the same for the effective year built. Overall would be 1960. Wall height is 13 feet to 23 feet. Zoning is M1. Land area is 89,907 square feet. Plan area is 38,465 square feet. Leasable area is 38,443 square feet. And land to plan area is 2.34. And page 2. The request for income has been received. Owners are compliant. Mailer is in the attachment on the back. Page 3. Property is on the northeast quadrant of the city near the corner of Watt Street and Chalmers Avenue. The bottom picture is a subject aerial view showing the lot shape. Access is on Union and Chalmers. Page 4. Just some more aerial views, some from a different angle. Page 5 would be the workup. 2 premises. The total leasable area is 38,443 square feet. Total potential rent is 278,403 square feet or dollars. And utilizing a blended model rate of $7.24 per square feet, 3% model vacancy rate, utilizing 3% for non-recoverable expenses and $3.85 per square feet for vacancy shortfall. This results in an NOI of $257,509, utilizing a cap rate of 7.55%. And this results in a rounded capitalized and assessed value of $3,411,000. Page 8. And here you'll find our capitalization rate chart. The table second from the top are the industrial capitalization rates that fall between the 20th and 80th percentile. As you can see, the subject properties capitalization rate falls outside of the 80th percentile. Our model cap rates are further supported by the table of outside sources. You can see Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman have developed cap rates ranging between 5.75 to 7.25. And on to page 10 to 13. And this is the income expense mailer showing owner is compliant and property is fully owner occupied. So we feel that the value is fair and equitable and should be confirmed. We're open to any questions.
All right. Questions, Mr. Story?
Yes, thank you. Just a few, Mr. Chair. Okay. Oh, and I'm asking you, Mr. Levinstein?
Yeah, you'll be
Okay.
asking me the questions. Thank you.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so now you have visited this property, I believe in relation to the previous cycle, so you're
That's
familiar
correct.
with it? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Now it says here, I guess just to back up, this is all model derived, correct? Everything in this assessment is modeled?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so and I'm okay with the cap rate, so I'll keep my questions brief. It says that there are 2 premises here, but there's indeed one large premise. That's how this property is treated. It's one big sort of warehouse it's been built up in a piecemeal fashion over the years. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, so that is correct. You can see on my page 4, basically, how it almost shows you with the different wall heights, how this building has been built up over the years.
Right. Okay. But it is indeed, just to be clear, it is one premise, and the market would treat it as one premise. There aren't separately demised premises, different entrances or what have you. It is oriented as a single tenant property at this stage, correct?
Sure, it's being used by one tenant, but in terms of demising, and you have inspected, and so have I, you would have noted that this building is quite devised. There's a lot of interior walls that are breaking up this building, and there are separate entrances, such as one on Watt, and then of course in the parking lot, and one off Union, I believe, as well.
Okay, but those demising walls are actually related to the operation of this business. So they're collecting donations, cleaning and repairing, sorting and pricing. So those demising areas are actually related to the business that is going on there now, correct?
Sorry, I guess you're saying that they put in those walls for that reasoning?
No, I'm saying that, okay, but if we're saying that there are two distinct premises here, if they moved out there, this would be treated as a large single premise. You're saying there's many walls demising the areas, but it's actually that's for their purpose, correct?
They are using it that way, yes.
Okay, and then I'm looking at the wall heights here. We can agree that the clear heights are a fair bit lower. Typically, we've got lights hanging down and that sort of thing. So it's different than our typical industrial buildings, because it is being used as a thrift store and warehouse. We typically would have lower clear heights here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, clear heights could be a little bit lower for sure.
Okay, and then a land to plan here. I think in the previous we mentioned, I think you said 3-to-1, but typically 4-to-1 is a typical land to plan for call it a mid-70s manufacturing operation. Isn't that fair to say? This would be lower.
I mean, I would say 3-to-1, 4-to-1 would be a really good land to plan.
Okay, but we can agree that at a minimum, it is lower than what would be considered typical, correct?
Yeah, so it is lower than so typical. So in terms of my comparables, which wasn't talked about in the presentation, but Burnett, the first one, we have one, it's 3.36. Day is quite a bit bigger at 5.93. 450 Deschambault is, I have this, sorry, give me a second, 1.82. It's almost quite low. 420 Terrain is a bit higher. I think I have a 1.2. No, sorry, I can't even read my writing here. I'll have to look at that one again. And then Stapleton's 1.78, and and 3 debates is a 1.78. So I have quite the range here of high end.
Okay, and we can agree though, I just want to stay on the first page for a second here. We can agree that this property on Chalmers, this is not in what we'll call a traditional industrial park by any stretch of the imagination. Is that fair to say?
I would not disagree with that.
Okay, and it is quite a regular parcel. It's a large triangle, and they require some parking on some city-owned land. You're aware of that?
That was brought up last time. They were definitely utilizing some city-owned land. Yes. Right.
Okay. Okay, and then I guess just generally, so you're using 724 per square foot, but that's blended, and this again comes back to this notion of two premises. But I guess my question is, since this is all indeed model derived, if the model were to treat this all as one 38,443 square foot premise, would that rent per square foot effectively go down? Would it be?
Yeah, it would effectively go down for sure.
Okay.
But we need to look at the fact that this building was built between 1907 and 2021. So the effective year built, you have to look at that as well, not just the overall square footage.
And can we agree though that the portion that was built in 2021 is a small area where they receive donations? So it's actually a fairly small addition.
It's for 3,256 square feet.
Right. Okay. Okay. And then just not to belabor this, but in terms of the expense ratio, in terms of the non-recoverables. The city's not provided a submission in this cycle. Is that correct?
We're a submission. No, we're just our 3% is, yeah.
Right. Okay. And then you'd mentioned a couple of these rental comps. We can agree, I think, though, that these are all being used for what we'll call typical industrial purposes. None of these certainly are large warehouses with thrift shops or whatever. These are more typical industrial properties. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that matters in the sense of industrial properties, particularly storage warehouses are used for a wide variety of different.
Okay. And then DeChambeau, is that the brewery and tap room that's like got a restaurant in it?
Just give me a second.
Just wonder if that's blended across there's a brewery, and then I know they also have a fairly modern tap room in there. Just wonder if that's that space.
Yeah, just bear with me for a minute.
Sure.
I don't have that there. I don't have the tenant.
Okay, that's okay. And just to be clear, though, number 1 is owner occupied, correct?
My 43 Burnett.
Yeah.
That's not what we have as owner occupied number.
Okay, I looked at the city
Something-
brief. The city brief said it was owner occupied, but that's okay if it's well, regardless. Now, okay. Just looking at the final quantum here, you're coming out to $89 per square foot. Isn't that reasonably high for a property of this vintage with some of these issues that we've discussed? You don't think that might be a touch high?
Sorry, you're $89 a square foot in terms of we were doing the direct comparison approach.
Just from what we know of sales in the market for a property that's not in an industrial area, that's built, it's originally built in 1907. The bones of this building is older, so doesn't that seem slightly high to you when you're as a secondary check on the assessment?
I can't answer that question because that's not how we value the property.
Okay.
Have any sales comparables in here to tell you that. So we're
Okay.
done on the income approach, and we feel the income approach is the proper way to value this property.
Right. Okay. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, any questions?
I don't at this time, thanks.
Okay, Gail, any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question then on the rental rate that you have. Am I correct in assuming then that typically you see higher rental rates for smaller areas, but is the 13,000 square foot area, is that the oldest area and that's why the rent is lower?
Yes, that's true. So that would be the area that's ranging from 1907 to 1941 are the builds. And then the other areas range from 1984 to 2021.
Okay, and as far as you're aware, then those older areas have never been improved?
When I walked through it, I would say some areas have not been improved to much of a degree, no.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions on that. So Mrs. Story, you can begin on the quantum.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Okay, so here we are at 419 Chalmers. I think we've discussed the neighborhood. We're not in a typical industrial area. If we go to page 3, you'll see an overhead map. This is page 5 of my brief. So you can see where we are here at the corner of Watt and Chalmers. The back end of the building is Union and Watt. You can see this is a very irregular parcel. I had mentioned that there is some parking going on city land, and that's if you see that sort of vertical strip of city land, it does indeed bifurcate the southern portion of the parking lot. So we do have a fairly low land to building for an industrial building of this type, but we also note that the parcel is quite irregular. So it's just something to consider. It is zoned M1. Now, in terms of the actual property, if you follow me, please, to page 7, I've broken it down for you by section. You can see it is typically masonry up until, well, typically masonry, except for one section built in 1990 that's wood frame. But I have the wall heights, the years built, and the construction type. You can see that 10.33% of this property was built in 1907, 18.42 was built in 1915, 7.44 was built in 1941. And then when we get into the more modern era, you can see that there was an expansion in 1984 of 14.25%. 1990 has a large expansion at 40.46, and again that 3,500 square foot addition that was constructed in order to facilitate greater donations during during COVID. Quite frankly, there was many of these folks were able to take on more donations and help people out, so they built that addition, and that equates to 9.1% of the total GLA. You can see on page 8 the wall heights. 9.36% of this property has 13-foot wall heights. 31% of the property has 16-foot wall heights. 17 feet at 7.44. Almost half of the property has 21-foot wall heights at 43%, and then 9.1 at 23%. So that's all included here for your consideration. We've got some photos of the exteriors. On page 9, that's the new donation drop-off and pickup. That is the addition that precipitated the supplementary. So that's all included there for you. Now, in terms of my rent comps, I've included some here on page, what page is this here? 14. Now I've looked at this again. I've initially suggested 575. I think that's a little too low, so I'm going to suggest that $6 per square foot is more reasonable. That brings us up to a potential net market income of $230,658. We do continue to apply our 5%, and that is, I believe Mr. Slaughter mentioned that is part and parcel of how we derive our cap rates. So if for any reason you do elect not to apply the 5%, then we would ask that the cap rate be adjusted to 7.25%. We note that the city's at 7.55. So ultimately, with an NOI of $200,011 and a capitalized or a cap rate of 7%, that brings us to an indicated market value of $2,857,303, which we then, of course, round to $2,857,000, which brings us to $74.33 per square foot. On page 15, I asked about the assessment per square foot and if it seemed high. In terms of our cap rate comparables, I think that $74 falls in line. We're not doing a direct comparison approach, but as a secondary check, it does seem to fall right into line. So ultimately, we are suggesting, Mr. Chair, that of course, we have the separate issue of the class code and liability, but in terms of quantum, we are requesting that given the very specific nature of this property, that the value not exceed $2,857,000. And again, that's based on an adjusted rental rate of $6. I have photos as per my May 2022 inspection. Those are starting on page 19. Feel free to flip through. You can see that much of the space is, well, it's not finished to a high degree, to be certain. They're typically collecting donations, repairing items, cleaning items, and then pricing items and putting them on the floor. There is some space for, there's a lunchroom in there. There's the repair shop. On the second floor, there is some space where the board meets, and that's included there as well. It has exceptionally low wall heights. That beam is about 6 feet, so you sort of have to duck when you're up there, but it is there. And then the final page of my photos, page 28, that is that new addition, and you can see that's where they're receiving donations. So I think I will leave that there, and I'm open to your questions.
Okay, questions, Mr. Lobenstein?
Just a few. So looking at your lease comparables on page 14.
Yeah.
Would you say the majority of these are at market? Because I'm seeing a lot from 2016, 2015, 2014.
Yeah, there's
2017.
there's a range, and I looked at that and I thought, well, we're a little low at that 575, but I also think that these properties they're in better locations typically. They're not built in the early 1900s for the most part. I don't think any are, quite frankly. And I think they're generally would be considered superior. So I agree with you. Some of them are a little bit older. They do run through the reference state. But I think that with everything we know about this property, and if we were to treat it as the leasable area as one premise, as we've done, so you'll see, Mr. Long, will see we don't have any 7,000 square feet or smaller spaces. The Mr. Chair has just quite rightly pointed out that as that leasable area goes down, typically the rental rate goes up. So we've tried to find something in and around that that's comparable to the subject. I feel quite comfortable at $6 a square foot. I think 724 is too high.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Okay, Gail, any questions?
I have no questions.
Jeff, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, I got a question. There was some discussion on demising walls. Is it fair to state that they put the operation around where the old units used to be, the old exterior walls, and that those walls are not readily removable?
Yeah, I don't think it's simply there are certainly masonry. There's a great deal of masonry throughout this building, Mr. Chair, and I think it's very difficult to take a wall that's from the turn of the 20th century and start demising it. So I don't think we should consider that we could easily demise or redemise this property without incurring certainly some costs, if not extensive costs. So I think that basically the building or the operations here, they're working with the property, but it has been constructed in a piecemeal fashion to be certain. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that then. I have no more questions. Does either party wish a summation?
No, I have no summation.
No, I think we're good. Just thank you for your time.
Okay. That we've heard all the items on the agenda today, and that concludes today's hearing. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.